The light is going gold over the hills now, the kind of gold that only comes right before evening settles in for good. Somewhere ahead, half hidden behind a slope of long grass, a shape begins to rise against the sky. Not a mountain, not quite a building either, not yet. Just a dark, rounded silhouette, patient and still, the way it has been for a very long time. This is a castle, and tonight you are walking toward it slowly with nowhere else to be. As you come closer, you notice the ground itself has been shaped. The earth rises into a tall, smooth mound, with a wide flattened space beside it lower down. This is older than the stone you can see in the distance. This shape of mound and yard was an idea that began across the sea in Normandy centuries ago, before it ever crossed to these shores. Builders would raise a steep earthen hill, called a motte, and beside it clear a wider yard, called a bailey, enclosed by a fence or a low wall. The whole arrangement, hill and yard together, let a lord and his household watch the land in every direction while staying close to shelter. It was simple, it was clever, and it worked well enough that it spread across an entire kingdom in just a few short decades. You let that settle in your mind the way mist settles over water. Slowly, without urgency. The very first of these castles were not made of stone at all. They were built of timber, raised quickly, often within weeks, using wood cut straight from nearby forests. Wood was fast. Wood was practical. But wood also burns, and wood also rots, and so as years passed, and as peace turned to need and then back to peace again, many of these wooden halls were rebuilt, slowly, deliberately, in stone. The stone that remains today, the kind you are walking toward right now, is very often the second or third version of a much older, much humbler structure that no longer exists at all. Everything solid was once something softer. The path beneath your feet curves gently downward now, toward a wide ditch that circles the base of the walls. The ditch holds no water tonight, only shadow, only stillness. But on many castles, ditches like this one were filled, becoming moats, slowing down anyone who approached without invitation. You cross over it now on a narrow bridge, and ahead of you, the gatehouse waits. Look up, just for a moment as you pass beneath it. There, set into the stone above the passageway, are small dark openings, no wider than a hand. These are sometimes called murder holes, though the name sounds harsher than the quiet stone itself. Defenders standing in the room above could use these openings to drop sand, or stones, or pour down water onto anyone trying to force their way through below. You don't need to imagine the noise or the danger of it tonight, only the quiet fact of it, that the people who built this place thought of everything, even the space directly above a visitor's head. The gate itself, heavy and banded with iron, would once have been lowered and raised by a portcullis, a grill of timber or metal that could drop quickly into place, sealing the entrance in moments. You can almost hear the low groan of old chains in the stillness, though tonight there is no chain at all. Only silence, and the soft sound of your own footsteps on worn stone. Inside now, the walls rise high around you, broken at the very top by a pattern you can just make out against the darkening sky. High sections, then low sections, then high again, evenly spaced like a great stone comb laid sideways. This pattern even has its own old names. The raised parts are called merlons, the gaps between them crenels, and together they are known as crenellation. The high stone gave defenders something solid to stand behind. The low gaps gave them a place to watch, and if it came to it, a place to aim. Tonight, though, they frame nothing but stars. Lower down the wall, near where you are walking, there are slimmer openings, tall and narrow, almost too narrow to put a hand through. These are arrow slits, sometimes called loopholes, and their shape was no accident. Narrow on the outside, where danger might come from, but often wider on the inside, where a person needed room to stand, to turn, to aim a bow without difficulty. A small opening to the world. A wider, safer space behind it. You breathe slowly and walk on. The courtyard opens up before you now, wide and quiet, ringed by smaller stone buildings along its edges. Somewhere within that thickness of wall, tucked into a narrow recess, would have been a small chamber for one of the castle's plainer comforts, what was once called a garderobe. It was, in plain terms, a toilet, often built directly into the wall's thickness, so that waste could fall straight down into the moat or a pit far below. And curiously, the very same word garderobe was also used for a wardrobe, a place to store clothing, because the sharp scent of the little chamber was believed, in its own strange way, to keep moths and fleas from settling into fine fabric nearby. A small, oddly practical detail, tucked into the corner of a much grander story. Ahead of you, a narrow stone staircase spirals upward into the dark, curving to the right as it climbs. This was rarely an accident either. Most spiral staircases in castles wind clockwise on the way up, which meant a defender retreating upward, most people being right-handed, would have a freer swing of the arm, while anyone climbing up after them would find their own sword arm pressed awkwardly against the central stone column. A quiet advantage built into the very shape of the steps beneath your feet. You don't climb tonight. Instead, you follow the wider passage at ground level, toward a heavy door standing slightly open, warm light spilling faintly from within. This leads to the great hall, the true heart of almost every castle like this one. It was here that meals were taken, where the lord and his household gathered at a raised table set above the rest of the room, where disputes were heard, where music might be played, where the whole life of the castle quietly turned, day after day, season after season. You step through the doorway. The warmth settles over you like a blanket pulled gently to the chin. And here, for now, we let this first part of the journey rest. The hill and the yard, the timber turned slowly to stone, the narrow eyes of the walls, the spiral stair curving always to the right, the quiet hall glowing ahead of you. There is more of the castle still to see. But not yet. Not tonight, not in this moment. For now, only stillness, only rest. The warmth of the great hall has settled over you now, and the door has closed softly behind you, shutting out the last of the evening air. In the middle of the floor, where you might expect a fireplace built into the wall, there is instead a wide, shallow hearth set right into the stone of the floor itself. This is older than it looks. In the earliest halls, fires were built this way, open, central, low to the ground, with the smoke rising up and drifting out through a small opening in the roof above, called a louvre. Wall fireplaces and the tall chimneys that came with them arrived only later. For a long while, smoke simply found its own way home, curling up into the dark of the rafters and out into the night sky. You watch it rise now, slow and unhurried. The way smoke always seems to know exactly where it's going. Beyond the far end of the hall, past where the firelight grows thin, a narrow covered passage leads outside toward a separate, smaller building standing a little apart from the rest. This is the kitchen, and it was almost always kept at a careful distance from the main hall. Not from any lack of care, but from a very practical kind of caution. Kitchens meant open flame, and open flame meant risk, so castle builders, time and again, chose to keep the cooking fires a little removed from the timber roofs and tapestried walls of the hall, joined only by a covered walkway like the one ahead of you now. Closer by, at the lower end of the hall, two low doorways sit side by side, each fitted with a small serving hatch at waist height. One leads to the pantry where bread was kept. The other leads to the buttery, where ale and wine were stored in casks. Food and drink passed through these little hatches all evening long, carried from the kitchen and handed through to servers, who carried it the rest of the way to the high table. You linger there only a moment, just long enough to notice how small, careful details like this kept an entire household quietly fed. A narrow stair near the hatches leads up and away from the noise of the hall, toward a quieter room above. This is the solar, a private chamber set aside for the lord and his family, away from the smoke and chatter below. Not every castle had one, especially the earliest, but as years went on and comfort came to matter more, a small private room like this became something many households wished for. A place to sit, to talk quietly, to simply be alone for a while, with the great hall's noise rising up only faintly through the floor. You climb a few steps toward it, then pause, content just to know it's there. Further along the passage, a low wooden door stands slightly ajar, and through it, candlelight flickers across a small chapel, barely large enough for a handful of people to kneel together. Tucked into the wall beside the altar is a strange little opening, no larger than a narrow window, angled so that someone standing just outside the chapel door could still see the altar without entering. This small opening is sometimes called a squint, and it let household members who couldn't fit inside still take part in a back through the hall now, and out across the courtyard. The tallest and plainest structure of the whole castle rises ahead of you. Square, solid, and considerably thicker in the wall than anything else you've passed tonight. This is the keep, sometimes called the dungeon, and it was built to be the strongest part of the entire castle. If every outer wall fell, if every gate gave way, the keep was where the household would gather last, behind walls sometimes 10 feet thick or more. Tonight, though, it holds nothing but quiet and shadow. Deep within the keep's lowest level, a circular stone shaft drops down into darkness. A well, dug straight down through the rock beneath the tower. Many keeps had their own well sunk directly into the foundation, for a simple, sturdy reason. In a long siege, no one could risk leaving the walls for water. A well like this one meant a castle could hold out for as long as its food lasted, without ever needing to step outside at all. You don't lean too far over the edge. You simply notice it, and let the thought of it settle, cool and still, like the water far below. Climbing higher now, toward the very top of the keep, you reach the open battlements once more. Except here, near the corners, the stone juts outward slightly, supported on small stone arches, with narrow gaps cut into the floor of the overhang itself. These are machicolations, and they served a purpose much like the murder holes from the gatehouse you passed earlier tonight. Only here, set along the outer wall, they let defenders drop stones or other objects straight down the face of the tower onto anyone gathered below, without ever needing to lean out into danger themselves. And there, hanging still in the cool night air above the battlement, a long banner moves only faintly in the breeze. A painted shield's pattern repeated on the cloth, bold colors that even now seem to hold their meaning. These devices, painted onto shields and banners alike, were heraldry, a way of recognizing a knight by sight alone, especially once a full helm hid every face beneath it. Each pattern belonged to a single family, carried from one generation into the next, a kind of quiet signature stitched into cloth and painted onto steel. You look at it a while longer, then let your eyes drift past it, up toward the stars instead. The wind is gentler up here than you expected. Somewhere below, the hall's fire is still glowing, and somewhere deeper still, that quiet well keeps its water cool and untouched. For now, this is enough of the castle to hold in your mind. The hearth and its rising smoke, the kitchen kept carefully apart, the small hatches of the buttery, the solar's quiet, the chapel's narrow squint, the keep standing thick and certain, the well sunk deep below it, the machicolations watching the wall's foot, and the banner moving softly above it all. There is still more ahead in time. But not tonight. For now, only stillness, only rest. The banner above you has gone still now, the breeze settling, and you begin to walk the wall walk slowly, your hand trailing along the cool stone beside you. Ahead, where the wall turns a corner, the tower there is round rather than square. A soft curve of stone rising up, smooth all the way around. Many castles, especially the older ones, were built first with square towers, sharp-cornered and solid-looking. But over time, builders began to favor rounded towers instead, like the one beside you now. A curve had no corner for a battering ram to catch, no blind edge where an attacker could hide unseen, and stone shaped this way simply turned aside force more easily than a flat, sharp angle ever could. You let your fingers follow the curve of it as you pass, the stone slightly cooler here than elsewhere. Below, in the gathering dark beyond the main gate, a second, smaller structure stands just outside the original walls, its own little tower and gateway, set in front of the main entrance like a small fortress of its own. This is a barbican, an outer defense built specifically to guard the approach to the gate itself, forcing any visitor, welcome or otherwise, to pass through one more narrow, watched space before ever reaching the true entrance at all. Further along the wall, almost hidden by a fold of stone and a curtain of ivy, a small, low door is set into the wall. Easy to miss unless you already know to look for it. This is a postern gate, a quiet secondary entrance, smaller and far less grand than the main gatehouse. A door like this might be used for everyday comings and goings that didn't need the ceremony of the front gate, or, should it ever come to it, as a quiet way out when a quiet way out was exactly what was needed. You step back inside now, into a long stone corridor, and the cold of the walls is softened here by heavy cloth hanging the whole length of it. Woven scenes, faded gently by years of candlelight and dust. These tapestries were never only decoration. Thick wall hangings like these helped trap warmth against cold stone, cutting the draft that crept so easily through bare castle walls. A castle, for all its strength, could be a cold place to live, and cloth like this was one of its few defenses against a different sort of enemy entirely. Near the base of a narrow stair, a worn stone plaque is set into the wall, carved with old, careful lettering you can barely make out in the dim light. It mentions a license, a formal permission, once required in places like medieval England, allowing a lord to legally fortify his home and crenellate its walls. Without such a license, fortifying a manor too boldly could be seen as a challenge to royal authority itself. Even strength, it seems, needed paperwork. The stair winds downward instead of up this time, deeper than you expected, the air growing cooler and quieter with every step. At the very bottom, behind a low door, lies a small, plain chamber, windowless, bare, and silent. Rooms like this, sometimes reached only through a trapdoor from above rather than any door at all, were used to hold prisoners and were sometimes called oubliettes, from a word meaning simply to forget. You don't linger here. You only note its quiet, narrow shape and turn back toward the stairs and the warmer air above. Back outside, beneath a clearing sky, your eyes are drawn upward to the roofline of the keep, where the surface catches what little moonlight there is and holds it in a dull, soft gleam. Many of the most important roofs in a castle like this one were covered not in thatch, but in sheets of lead, heavier, far more expensive, but far more lasting too, able to withstand decades of rain and wind without ever needing to be replaced. And as you stand there, looking up at that quiet, gleaming roofline, you notice how still everything has become. The fire in the great hall has burned down low. The well sits silent in the dark beneath the keep. The banners no longer stir. Every castle like this one, in the end, was built around a single simple idea, not just stone for its own sake, but shelter. Walls within walls, gate within gate, door beyond hidden door, each one built so that the people inside might finally rest safely for the night. So, for tonight, that is exactly what you do. You find a quiet corner near the dying warmth of the hall fire, and you let your eyes close. The stone around you has stood for centuries. It will go on standing, long after tonight, long after this small, quiet visit of yours. There is nothing left to watch for, nothing left to listen for, only the slow settle of old stone, and the soft, even sound of your own breathing. Rest now. The castle will still be here in the morning.